Chapter 6, Reason and the Senses. Now, we're operating under the assumption that the justified true belief theory of knowledge makes some sense, the JTB theory. And that theory of knowledge is that you know something if and only if you actually believe it, which means you assent to it. This belief is just a mind state. You got a proposition in the world, such as there's snow on the ground. And you believe that proposition if you assent to it. You agree. You say, yes, indeed, there is snow on the ground. It's only knowledge if it's true, if there's actually snow on the ground. And last, it's only knowledge if you have adequate justification to conclude that there's snow on the ground. And one form of adequate justification would be your direct sense experience. You go outside, you touch the snow, you look with your very own eyes, you confirm it's snow. That would be adequate justification. And the justification is the focus of this section of this chapter. And when we're looking for justification for our beliefs, and if we want our beliefs to constitute actual knowledge and want our beliefs to be more likely to be true than false, we need to have justification that is truth conducive. I've used the phrase truth oriented in the past. We need an epistemic justification. Now, what might be another type of justification for a belief? Say someone takes a gun and they point it at you and they say, I want you to believe there is no snow on the ground, even though you see that there's snow on the ground and you initially believed there was snow on the ground, you had epistemic justification to believe there's snow on the ground. Now that you have a gun pointed at you and your life is being threatened, you have a pragmatic reason to believe there's not snow on the ground or that the sky is green or any number of things. If you're being threatened in this way, you may have zero epistemic, truth-oriented or truth-conducive justification to believe the proposition. You may have a pragmatic justification. That's not the sort of justification that critical thinkers are after. We want our beliefs to be true and not simply convenient or pragmatic, but instead lead us to what's actually true. Now, of course, desire is not evidence. Wishful thinking does not make a thing true. It sure would be nice if things that we want to be true are true, but they're not good reason or truth conducive reason to believe that they're true. And a critical thinker, as Herrick puts it, proportions the strength of their belief based on the evidence, believing it strongly or weakly as the case may be. So your justification increases, you get more and more quality evidence, you have stronger reason to believe that proposition. Or it could go in the other direction. You have more reason, more evidence to not believe a proposition. Or you could be right in the very middle, in which case you would be what's called agnostic, awaiting further evidence one way or the other. You could say, I'm not sure, I'm agnostic on this thing. But in any case, after you move off that zero needle to the one direction or the other, you would have a stronger or a weaker belief based on the evidence if you're a good critical thinker. Now, epistemology, as I mentioned in the last lecture, is a subdiscipline of philosophy that specializes in knowledge. It's not my specialty, something that I know some people enjoy very much. There's a lot of contemporary modern day philosophical progress being made in the area of epistemology. I far prefer ethics and political philosophy. But there are three primary schools of epistemology, and Herrick points out that, look, this isn't a class on epistemology, this is just a little side exploration. But to expose you to those three different schools, you have first foundationalism. And foundationalism is the account of knowledge that we have self-evident basic beliefs, which serve as a rock bottom foundation for a noetic structure, which means a building-like edifice of beliefs. So you can think of a tall office building. At the very, very bottom, you have the foundation, and that's where those basic beliefs are. Everything else is built upon those. And you might ask, well, what would be some examples of these basic beliefs? Well, on page 169, Herrick gives some examples. He says examples given by advocates of foundationalism include mathematical truths, such as if X is greater than Y and Y is greater than Z, then X is greater than Z. Logical theorems, such as if P implies Q and P is true, then Q must be true. And conceptual truths, such as nothing is all over, red all over, and green all over at the same time. And also the whole is greater than the part. I like this next one better. Some foundationalists also offer perceptual claims as examples of basic but justified beliefs such as I'm experiencing the taste of lemon, if you're actually tasting lemon, and I see something red in my visual field. Those would be basic beliefs. You have these foundational beliefs that you've directly experienced or they're self-evident as a matter of logic. And then on those, you have more complicated beliefs that are grounded in on those basic beliefs. That's foundationalism. Now, with the infinite regression theory of belief, you don't have a foundation, but instead those basic beliefs go back in ad infinitum. So one belief is justified in terms of a more basic belief, which is justified in terms of a belief even more basic still, and so on to infinity. That one's kind of difficult to grasp. I liken both the foundationalism and the infinite regress theories of knowledge to some explanations of the origins of the universe. There's a first cause argument that something needed to bring the universe into existence, something that existed outside of the universe. And once that first cause started, everything else took off. But then there's also the argument that the universe perhaps has always existed into the past infinitely. That one's always difficult for me to accept. It just seems like logically it'd be hard for something to exist infinitely into the past, but it's certainly a possibility. It's a possibility here as well. But then the last theories of epistemology that Herrick presents, and the one that I think he favors and perhaps makes the most sense, you might agree, is coherentism. And here it's more like a web than an office tower. Let's quiet down a little bit. More like a web than an office tower. Experience informs working theories, and working theories shade how we interpret experience. And so you've got some back and forth between logic and what you go into the world and you experience directly. And as you consider examples in different areas, this informs your personal theory, your personal understanding of different things in the world. And your personal understanding and theory of the way the world works is going to shade the way that you interpret new evidence, and new evidence is going to shade your theories. Basic example, you may have some stereotype in mind about a particular group of people. You may say that Florida Gator fans are annoying idiots. And then you happen to befriend one. And so you have to revise your theory about Florida Gator fans in general. Or you may believe that UFOs don't exist, and then you're abducted by aliens. You have to revise your theory about aliens. So in coherentism, it goes back and forth. Foundationalism from the bottom up. Infinite regress, it goes back on the basic beliefs into infinity. Now, regardless of which theory of knowledge makes the most sense, and again, I think we know which one Herrick finds most plausible here, we clearly hold and revise our beliefs all the time, deriving knowledge from our senses and from our intellect. We reflect on the world. We constantly update our comprehensive worldview, whether we sit down and type it out on a computer or we just subconsciously revise what we believe about the world and the way things operate. We do that all the time. And we use touchstones in the world to keep us grounded with reality. Touchstone is, quote, a test or criterion for determining the quality or genuineness of a thing. And when it comes to truth and belief, something we know can be used to determine the truth or falsity of other beliefs we hold. And a touchstone could be direct experience. It could be that you've had that direct experience with that thing, and therefore you're going to say, I'm going to trust my experience. Now, Herrick provides a distinction between a posteriori and a priori knowledge. Listen to how smoothly I say that. The only reason I say those things smoothly is because before I hit record, I had to say them for 2 or 3 minutes because they're ridiculous Latin phrases that are fancier sounding than they actually are. A posteriori just means knowledge that you gain through experience. And a priori knowledge is just knowledge you're able to infer without directly experiencing the world. Now, I'm going to give you some examples. I know that sounds fancy and complicated. A posteriori knowledge, this is just knowledge that we gain from our senses. Here's one example. Coaching is fun. There's nothing embedded in the concept of coaching or the concept of fun that would lead you to conclude, once understanding what coaching is and what fun is, that coaching would be fun. You have to go out and do it. Now, coaching is not always fun. It's less fun when you're getting beat terribly. It's less fun when you're coaching brats. But when you have good players and you're successful, it's very much fun, especially when those players grow and they come to respect you and befriend one another. It'll be very satisfying and very fun. It's a cool way to give back to the community and influence your culture in a positive way. Another one, music makes almost everything better. There's nothing about the concept of music that you could take and then say, well, that probably makes working and working out and riding a four-wheeler and doing anything, almost anything better. You just have to figure that out through experience. And I dare you to challenge me. What's something that is not better with music? I think almost everything would be better, depending on the music and on the thing that you're doing. Parenting changes your character. Now, you might know a little bit about child rearing, and you might know a little bit about the human condition. You might be able to put together some connections, but there's nothing logically entailed with the concept of parenting and character that would allow you to immediately conclude that yes, it definitely changes your character. You just have to become a parent, and you have to sacrifice, and you have to develop compassion and patience and love and devotion. And those things only come through the act of parenting. Well, I guess they could come from other things, but they definitely come through the act of parenting. But that's something that you learn through experience. So that's why that's a form of a posteriori knowledge. Very smooth, right? Of course, this type of knowledge is not infallible. We can see things because we expect or want to see them. I may really want to believe that UFOs are real. And so when I see swamp gas, I conclude that that is indeed a UFO, or perhaps it's a mirage. Maybe our senses are being fooled because maybe it is the swamp gas, and we really are ambivalent about whether aliens exist. But based on the shape of that thing, man, it must be a UFO. Or we're very tired, or we're under the influence of any number of different substances, and so therefore our senses trick us. Our minds are playing tricks on us. Now, that other form of knowledge with the fancy name, a priori knowledge, that's based on our intellect. And now, when you see some examples here, you'll get the difference between a posteriori and a priori. Here's an example. All bachelors are unmarried. If you understand what the concept of being a bachelor is, you don't have to go out and poll bachelors. You don't have to go out and test this. You just know that for a person to genuinely be a bachelor or a bachelorette, they're unmarried. It's built into the concept itself. You don't have to go out and test anything. Every square has four sides. Once you understand the definition of a square or a triangle or octagon, you don't have to go out and test this. You don't have to go out and look at multiple squares or triangles or octagons. You just know by definition it has X number of sides. If P, then Q, P, therefore Q. That's a classic logical form. And that was one of the basic beliefs that Herrick offered earlier from the foundationalists. It just means if Q necessarily comes about from P, one thing happens, the other one's necessarily going to happen. Well, if the first one in the sequence happens, you're going to have the second one. For example, if you cut off my head, I will die. You cut off my head, therefore I will die. That's a terrible example, but just giving you the basic structure. But you don't have to go out and test this. You don't have to get lots of different examples of that actually fit that if P then Q, and then confirm that, well, there's P and then it leads to the Q. You can just tell from basic logic by examining it. It's self-evidently true from the concept itself. Further, if A precedes B and B precedes C, then A precedes C, similar to the basic belief earlier about A being bigger than B, etc. And last, this is possibly a controversial one, but maybe not. This is from the realm of ethics. And this might be intuitively self-evident. Herrick believes that it is apparently. We should treat like cases alike. Now, he doesn't use that particular phrase. That's what he's getting at when he talks about if you treat a person in a certain situation a certain way, you should treat others in the same situation in a similar fashion. It's just a basic tenet of morality that's been true and accepted across cultures and generations, regardless of their situation, that you should treat like cases alike. That's what laws based on fairness is based on that basic moral principle. And it's something that we can possibly infer without having to go out in the world and experience morality or ethics at all. Now, of course, a priori knowledge also isn't infallible. Perhaps we make some sort of a incorrect judgment. We misunderstand a concept, we misunderstand how concepts interact, and then we're corrected. So this also isn't an infallible form of knowledge. Now, here's a criticism of a priori knowledge. Some people have argued that it doesn't exist at all, and Herrick considers this in the book. He says we can't make sense of propositions without language, and we need experience to develop language. Therefore, all knowledge requires experience. So you might have an a priori piece of knowledge. You think you've inferred this stuff about bachelors without having to go out in the world, but you only know that what a bachelor even is because you've developed language and you've experienced lots of things. So it's not like a person could just be born and kept in isolation, never left, never experienced anything, and be able to draw a priori inferences. Therefore, a priori knowledge doesn't exist. However, the reply is that maybe we do need senses to understand the meaning of concepts to develop language, which facilitates this understanding. But with a priori knowledge, it's the epistemic justification that happens without that interaction with the world. The intellectual insight happens in your head. So it's just a clarification of how it happens. So notice that one of the requirements of a good philosophical argumentative essay is to proactively consider and respond to a reasonable objection. And that's what Herrick's doing here. He's doing that in lots of different places in the book. Now, last, he considers an objection from the other direction. Many roses are red. Is this just a purely a posteriori piece of knowledge, a proposition, something that we can know through only direct experience without any need for a priori conceptual interaction or our intellect? And he says careful analysis reveals that part of a complete justification for this proposition being true or believing it would also include the claims that our memory is reliable. You're remembering that many roses are red, and you're trusting that memory, and so that's something that possibly could be a priori, and that the best explanation of our sense observations is likely true. Those could actually be a posteriori. If your memory has proven correct in the past, that's something you've gained through experience, not something that's built into the concept of memory. And our sense observations being likely true, that's something that we suppose could think about from a philosophical, intellectual perspective, considering concepts only. There's not going to be a whole lot that happens in direct experience that would confirm that, but perhaps it would. Perhaps our senses have been trusted in the past. We've said, yeah, it looks like there's snow out there. You go out there and you feel it, it's cold. It really is snow, but you're trusting your senses as well. So I'm not sure you could think about that one. But coherentists, and this is the direction that Herrick obviously leans, argue that the process of justification goes back and forth constantly between the two poles of reason and the senses. We have these basic theories about the way the world is, the way things are, and then we have our experience of particular examples and instances in the world, and then we revise our theories based on our experiences, and we also have our experiences colored and shaded in our perception of them by the theories that we hold. Keep that in mind as we move through this material and into a bit more of an exploration into a bit more epistemology when we get to chapter 7, personal experience, testimony, and expert authority.